Emma hesitated at the ornate wrought iron gates of the Fairmont Country Club, the afternoon sun casting long shadows over the manicured greens and sparkling lakes. The invitation in her hand felt heavier than it should. She smoothed her modest dress, simple, without a hint of the opulence swirling inside those walls, and took a deep breath. This was her first time at such a prestigious venue, a place where the world's elite mingled casually over champagne and golf, a far cry from her usual surroundings. Emma wasn't here to golf or to flaunt wealth. She was volunteering for the charity tournament, hoping to make a difference. But as soon as she crossed the threshold, a wave of unease swept over her. The polished floors and crystal chandeliers seemed to whisper that she didn't belong. From across the room, Mr. Thornton regarded her with thinly veiled disdain. The club's manager, a tall man in his 50s with sharp features and an air of unquestioned authority, was known for his exacting standards and low tolerance for anything that threatened the club's image. His eyes narrowed as they settled on Emma's plain attire and tentative smile. He approached her quietly, like a predator circling prey, before clearing his throat. "Madam, this is a private club," he said, voice crisp and cold. "Your appearance is not in line with our dress code. I'm afraid you must leave." Emma blinked in surprise. "I was invited to volunteer for the charity event," she replied gently, holding out the invitation card. "I'm here to help." Mr. Thornton's eyes flicked over the card, then snapped back to her face. "I'm sure there's been some mistake. This event is for members and distinguished guests only." His tone was dismissive, final. A cluster of guests nearby turned their heads, their whispers like blades piercing the quiet air. Emma felt the heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassment blooming swiftly. She wanted to explain more, to convince him, but he merely gestured toward the exit. Without another word, he turned on his heel, leaving Emma standing alone, the weight of 100 judging eyes pressing down on her. The murmur of the gathering grew louder when Mr. Thornton's sharp command reached the ears of the assembled guests. A few heads turned fully to regard Emma with a combination of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. Her heart pounded fiercely, each rapid beat echoing the growing knot of dread in her stomach. She tried to steady her trembling hands as she looked around at the sleek polished room filled with people dressed in perfectly tailored suits and elegant gowns. The slight awkwardness of her simple dress suddenly felt like a glaring spotlight on her perceived inadequacy. "I'm sorry, but you need to leave," Mr. Thornton said again, this time with a steelier tone. "Security will escort you out." A couple of burly men who had been lingering nearby at the edge of the crowd moved quickly toward her, their expressions unreadable but exuding authority. "No, please," Emma said, voice barely above a whisper, but determined. "I'm here for the charity event. I promise I'm supposed to be here." Mr. Thornton snorted dismissively. "Everyone here is supposed to be here, but not everyone is welcome. Your presence here is disruptive. This club has standards." The pressure of the crowd's scrutiny became unbearable. A few people whispered to each other over their glasses, glancing at Emma's modest attire, her nervous stance. One woman near the back made a barely stifled giggle that echoed around the marble walls. Another man shook his head, his expression a mix of pity and disdain. Emma's cheeks burned hot, hot enough to mask the chill that seeped into her bones. She felt as though the room was shrinking, closing in around her. Her initial hope of contributing to the charity felt like a foolish dream, trampled under the weight of judgment and exclusion. "Please, just a moment," she pleaded, taking a step forward. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to help." But Mr. Thornton held up his hand to silence her, the grip of his control absolute in that moment. "You don't understand the atmosphere here, or what this club represents. It's not your place." A sudden rise of whispers turned into chuckles as several guests exchanged quick looks of superiority. The sense of invisibility Emma had felt for years, one she had fought hard to shed, pressed down now with crushing force. She caught sight of a few eyes that looked confused or uncomfortable, but no one stepped forward to challenge the club manager's verdict. Security moved closer, their hands positioned near their belts, ready to escort her out, as Mr. Thornton watched with a thin smile that was devoid of warmth. The finality in his gaze told Emma he expected no resistance. Overcome with a mix of humiliation and despair, she nodded quietly. Her throat tightened, a lump forming that made it difficult to speak. She turned away from the group, the cold air from the entrance hall brushing against her face, offering a harsh contrast to the warmth she'd briefly sought inside. Outside, the sunlight felt uncomfortably bright, casting sharp shadows beneath the towering trees that bordered the club's grounds. Emma's legs trembled as she rested against the smooth stone wall, her breaths coming in shallow, uneven gulps as she fought the urge to break down. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed Lucy's number before the emotions overwhelmed her. "Lucy," she said, voice quivering. It's horrible. I thought I was supposed to help with the event, but Mr. Thornton, he said I don't belong there." She paused, swallowing the pain. "They all looked at me like I was some kind of joke." Lucy's warm voice came through the speaker, steady and reassuring. "Emma, you don't deserve that. I'm so sorry they treated you like that. Are you okay? What do you want to do now?" Emma wiped a tear from her cheek, feeling the sting but also her stubborn resolve begin to bloom. "I don't know. Part of me just wants to go home and forget the whole thing. But maybe I should stand my ground. I don't want them to think they can just push me out." Lucy hesitated before answering. "If you want to go back, I'm with you. But only if you're sure it's what you want. You don't have to face those people alone." Emma glanced again at the club's stately entrance, the line of windows reflecting the perfectly trimmed lawns and the glittering white golf carts idling by. She imagined the glances she'd face if she returned, the skepticism, the cold stares. But beneath her nervousness, a flicker of courage sparked. "I'll go back," she said quietly. "I can't just let him get away with humiliating me, and all of the volunteers. I'm more than this dress, Lucy." "How are you going to do it?" Lucy asked, a note of concern in her voice. Emma took a deep breath. "I don't know yet. But I won't just disappear." Back inside, the crowd had barely noticed her absence, their conversations resuming as though nothing had happened. Only Mr. Thornton seemed unsettled, casting furtive glances toward the door where Emma had exited. It was clear he relished the power he held when he dismisses those he deemed unworthy, yet something about Emma's departure unsettled him. The guests started dispersing, some approaching the bar to refresh their drinks, others breaking into small groups to chatter about the upcoming tournament. A cluster of women discussing the latest fashion trends whispered behind their fans of cocktail napkins, glancing discreetly at the spot where Emma had stood. One older gentleman, leaning heavily on a silver cane, shook his head while muttering, "A shame. Poor girl really didn't belong here." Another younger man laughed softly. "She didn't even dress the part. What was she thinking?" Emma's absence seemed soon forgotten by most, but for her, the sting was fresh and raw, awakening something fierce inside, a refusal to be dismissed or diminished. Just then, Mr. Thornton was approached by the head of the club's board, an imposing woman named Ms. Calloway. Her gaze was sharp and calculating as she regarded the manager. "We heard about the incident with the volunteer," Ms. Calloway said evenly, though her eyes betrayed curiosity. "Are you certain we handled that appropriately?" Mr. Thornton straightened, confidence returning quickly. "Definitely, ma'am. We maintain strict standards here. We cannot allow anyone to jeopardize the club's reputation." Ms. Calloway nodded slowly, but her expression was unreadable. "Very well. But do keep me informed." As the conversation ended, Mr. Thornton's attention flicked back toward the silent entrance, where a shadow lingered briefly before disappearing around the corner. Emma was gone for now, but her story was far from over. Meanwhile, inside the club, the guests resumed their mingling, perhaps wondering if the quiet woman who was forcibly removed might one day return to claim her place. What would you do if you were in Emma's position? Would you walk away quietly, or would you find a way to challenge the judgment and prove them wrong? Her story hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in whispered doubts and unspoken defiance, as Emma stood alone, her heart heavy but unbroken, ready for whatever came next. The morning sun rose crisp and clear over the serene Fairmont Country Club, casting a golden glow on the sprawling greens and glistening clubhouse windows. Emma arrived, her footsteps calm but purposeful, carrying a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the uncertain woman who had left the grounds the day before. But today, there was a difference, an undeniable change that made several early arrivals pause in surprise. Emma's simple dress had been replaced by a tailored, elegant sapphire gown that shimmered softly in the sunlight, and atop her dark, softly curled hair sat a regal crown that sparkled with diamonds and sapphires, catching the eye of every onlooker. A small entourage accompanied her, a few attentive aides and dignitaries who recognized her for who she truly was. Word had traveled swiftly among the club's community that the woman they had dismissed was no ordinary volunteer, but someone far beyond their expectations. As she approached the front doors, a hush fell over the small crowd gathered outside. Whispers fluttered through the air. "Is that," one woman whispered, her voice trailing off in awe. "Princess Emma," a man breathed, stepping forward as if to get a better look. Emma entered gracefully, her eyes scanning the room until they found Mr. Thornton standing by the ornate reception desk, stiff and glancing anywhere but at her. She approached him directly, her voice clear and steady. "Mr. Thornton, I trust you recall our interaction yesterday." He faltered, the color draining from his face. "Your Highness," he stammered, bowing his head slightly, I didn't realize. This is quite unexpected." Emma gave a polite but firm smile. "It was necessary for me to see how the club manages its guests. I hope to witness true hospitality and fairness, especially during a charity event." A murmur rippled through the room, and guests ceased their side conversations, drawn toward the moment unfolding. "I am here," she continued, "to oversee this tournament and ensure it upholds the integrity and generosity it promises." Her gaze swept the room, steady and commanding. At that moment, the club's director of charity programs, Mr. Oliver Grant, stepped forward. "Princess Emma has been working quietly for years, supporting various causes anonymously. This visit is part of her ongoing commitment." Several guests exchanged looks of surprise, realizing their earlier judgments had been misplaced. Even some of the sternest faces softened. Mr. Thornton swallowed hard, his earlier authority diminished under the light of her presence. "Your Highness, if I may," he began hesitantly, "our club standards are strict to preserve our reputation. I was unaware of your involvement and apologize for any distress caused." Emma inclined her head slowly. "Acknowledgement is a start. Hospitality requires more than appearances, it requires understanding and respect." The mood in the room shifted palpably. Where there had been exclusion, now there was humility. Where there had been cold judgment, warmth and admiration began to surface. The charity tournament commenced with Emma overseeing every detail, arranging participants, coordinating speeches, and engaging with the guests kindly but authoritatively. Her attentiveness showed a side rarely seen in royalty, a genuine concern for the cause and for the people involved. As the day progressed, Emma's presence became a source of inspiration. Guests previously indifferent to the event found themselves drawn into the spirit of generosity she radiated. Mr. Thornton, watching from the sidelines, was forced to confront the reality that the woman he had dismissed and humiliated was someone whose character and status far exceeded his assumptions. Midway through the afternoon, a spontaneous moment arose when one of the young volunteers, a timid girl named Sophie, accidentally dropped a stack of event flyers. The crowd's attention seemed to waver, but Emma stepped forward, kneeling beside the girl and helping her gather the papers. "Every role here matters," she said softly, eyes meeting Sophie's. Your effort is just as important as anyone's." The simple kindness drew a smile from Sophie, who nodded gratefully. Witnessing the unfolding scene, the guests' expressions softened further, their judgments quietly dissolving. That evening, as the tournament concluded successfully, Emma was approached by several club members and guests eager to express their newfound respect. One older lady, Mrs. Whitman, came forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "Princess Emma, you have shown us all a lesson in humility and grace. Thank you for reminding us of what truly matters." Emma smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. It is my hope that we continue to lift each other, not tear down." Mr. Thornton, standing a short distance away, locked eyes with Emma. His shoulders sagged slightly, and a flicker of remorse passed through his gaze. The day's events culminated in a reception held in Emma's honor. As the guests applauded her dedication and leadership, the barriers of prejudice and misunderstanding that had clouded the club the day before began to crumble. Outside the grand windows, twilight deepened, and the stars started to peek through the sky, witnesses to a night of transformation. The scene closed with Emma gazing thoughtfully at the horizon, a quiet strength emanating from her, a declaration that she was not a woman to be overlooked or underestimated. Around her, the murmurs of disbelief and admiration intertwined, as everyone present grappled with the truth that appearances had deceived them all. The very people who had whispered behind her back now found themselves caught in the glow of her luminous presence. What would you do if you were part of that crowd? Would you have the courage to admit when you're wrong, or would you cling to your assumptions? Emma's story was only beginning to unfold, and the world she stepped into that day was never the same again. As the evening settled over the Fairmont Country Club, the grand hall softened under the warm glow of chandeliers. The murmur of guests admiring the success of the charity tournament wove through the air, a gentle hum of renewed respect and admiration. Emma stood quietly near a corner of the ballroom, her gaze steady but thoughtful as she observed the room's transformed atmosphere. It wasn't just the sparkling gowns or raised voices of celebration that marked this night, it was a profound shift in the hearts and minds of those present. They no longer saw her as the simple, modest woman who had been turned away the day before. Tonight, she was a symbol of quiet strength and grace, a living lesson in dignity and humility. A few guests approached respectfully, eager to hear more about the woman behind the crown. Among them was Ms. Calloway, the club's head of the board, whose earlier skepticism had softened into genuine interest. Drawing Emma aside, she spoke quietly, "Princess, may I ask, why did you choose to attend yesterday dressed so simply? You must forgive me, but few are accustomed to such humility at a place like this." Emma smiled gently, the kind of warmth that speaks more in silence than words. "I believe true character is revealed not in grand settings, but amidst everyday moments," she said thoughtfully. "When I travel for my charity work, I wear what is practical and unpretentious so that my actions, not my appearance, define me. Yesterday was a chance to be seen for who I am beneath the surface." Ms. Calloway nodded, touched and impressed. "It takes real courage to do what you did, walking in without the veil of status, exposing yourself to judgment, and still standing tall." Emma's eyes flickered with a touch of quiet resolve. "Perhaps, but it's also a reminder that kindness and respect should never be dependent on one's position or attire." Near them, Oliver Grant, the club's director of charity programs, listened with admiration. He stepped forward and added, "Emma's commitment to giving back has always been remarkable, but few knew the extent of her dedication before today. She prefers to work under the radar, focusing on the impact rather than recognition." Emma glanced across the room, where Sophie, the young volunteer she'd comforted that afternoon, was now happily mingling with the other guests, her earlier nerves replaced by newfound confidence. "It's important to me," Emma said, "that everyone involved in these efforts feels valued, no matter their role or background. The world is too often divided by superficial impressions, and that divides us in ways that hurt us all." The evening wore on, with laughter and conversations that suggested bridges had been built where walls once stood. Emma shared stories of her travels, quietly slipping in tales of the communities she had helped and the passion that fueled her philanthropic work. The guests listened attentively, struck by the humility beneath her regal exterior. At one point, Mr. Thornton appeared near the edge of the gathered crowd. His usual commanding posture was diminished, the arrogance replaced by an uneasy quietness. Emma met his gaze across the room. In that moment, no words were exchanged, but the unspoken changes were palpable. The man who had so confidently dismissed her now faced the undeniable truth that he had gravely underestimated her. Over time, Emma's presence began to change the fabric of the club itself. What had been a place defined by rigid expectations and exclusivity now hinted at openness, warmth, and inclusivity. Conversations sparked spontaneously about inviting more diverse volunteers and guests, and about focusing on the spirit of charity rather than status. Later, as the night deepened and the last guests bid their farewells, Emma found a quiet moment alone on the balcony overlooking the expansive grounds. The moonlight painted silver outlines around the fairways, where the morning's tournament had taken place. She felt a profound sense of peace and quiet satisfaction. Her journey to this evening had been more than just about charity, it had been a testament to the strength of dignity, resilience, and grace in the face of judgment. The decision to arrive simply dressed had not been a miscalculation, but a deliberate choice to remind the world that true worth is not measured by outward appearances. Behind her, the grand hall hummed softly with fading laughter and voices. In that stillness, Emma's thoughts drifted back to the events of the day, the judging stares, the humiliation, the surprise and admiration. She recognized that the real victory lay not just in the crowd's applause, but in the subtle shifts within hearts and minds. A soft voice behind her broke the silence. "Emma," Miss Calloway said gently, stepping onto the balcony, "you've done more than organize a successful tournament. You've ignited a spark that could change this entire community." Emma smiled quietly. "That is my hope." Together, they stood silently, watching the stars emerge like tiny beacons above the rolling hills. The future hinted at new possibilities, of courage over judgment, of kindness over exclusion. Emma's true strength was not just her crown or her title, but the humility and wisdom she carried with it. The simple woman who had been humiliated was now a leader, not by virtue of birthright alone, but because she embodied the change she wished to see. The night closed on a soft promise, a promise that this transformation was only just beginning. With each step forward, the world could become a place where everyone, regardless of how they look or where they come from, could be seen, heard, and valued. And as Emma turned back inside, ready to face whatever the future held, it was clear that respect and kindness had won the day. The story is far from over. The morning after the charity tournament dawned over the Fairmont Country Club with a quiet yet palpable shift in atmosphere. Word of Princess Emma's dignified return and graceful leadership had spread swiftly, leaving ripples across the community and particularly within the club's administration. Mr. Thornton arrived at the clubhouse earlier than usual, his usually confident stride now heavy with the weight of consequence. The sting of being publicly humbled still lingered, but what gnawed deeper was the knowledge that his actions had not gone unnoticed, not by the members, and certainly not by the club's board. A short time after his arrival, Miss Calloway summoned him to a private meeting. The board was concerned, not just about the disruption caused but about the damage done to the club's reputation and values. His treatment of Emma, a dignitary and person of genuine goodwill, could not be ignored. "As manager, it is your responsibility to lead with respect and fairness," Ms. Calloway said firmly, her tone leaving little room for argument. "Your behavior brought unwarranted harm and embarrassment to a woman who came to serve a noble cause and represent an even nobler mission." Mr. Thornton bowed his head, the arrogance drained from his expression. "I understand, ma'am. I allowed assumptions to cloud my judgment. We are placing you on leave while we search for new leadership," she continued, her voice steady but impartial. "This club must move forward with a commitment to inclusivity and kindness, values you failed to uphold." Though the blow was harsh, Mr. Thornton neither argued nor protested. pride was swiftly replaced by reflection. Perhaps this moment, as painful as it was, would be the reckoning he needed. Meanwhile, news of the incident and its aftermath spread beyond the club's marble halls. Several members reached out to Emma, expressing apologies, gratitude, and admiration for her grace under fire. Many pledged to support initiatives she championed to make the club more welcoming to diverse volunteers and guests, ensuring no one else would suffer similar humiliation. Emma responded with the same humility and kindness that had captured everyone's hearts. Invitations flooded in for talks and appearances, but she remained focused on her mission: to foster empathy, break down barriers, and encourage genuine connection. Her evenings now often found her in meetings with club members, discussing plans for outreach programs, scholarships, and community events designed to bridge gaps of misunderstanding and privilege. Emma's vision was clear: to transform spaces of exclusion into places where dignity was the birthright of all. Through it all, Sophie, the young volunteer whose trembling hands Emma had steadied, blossomed under her mentorship. The shy girl gained confidence, eventually standing before new crowds, inspired to make a difference herself. To Emma, this personal ripple effect was the true measure of success. One brisk afternoon, Emma was invited to give a heartfelt speech at a gathering organized by the club's new leadership. Standing before a packed room, she began not with lofty proclamations, but a simple question. Have you ever been made to feel less than you are, overlooked, judged, or dismissed because of how you look or where you come from? A silence filled the room as guests reflected on the honest query. Emma spoke then of her experience, the sting of exclusion but also the courage to reclaim one's place through resilience and kindness. I wore a simple dress the day I first arrived, she said softly, not because I sought pity or attention, but because I wanted to be known for who I truly am, beyond the surface. What matters most is how we treat each other, not the clothes we wear or the titles we hold. Her words stirred a profound sense of introspection in her listeners. Applause followed, warm and sustained. After the event, guests approached to share their own stories, about moments they'd overlooked others or let prejudice cloud their judgment. Emma received their confessions with grace, reaffirming that change begins with awareness and empathy. At last, the club had not only changed its leadership but embarked on a new path, a path where respect thrived and all could feel safe and valued. In a quiet moment, Emma found herself walking the well-tended gardens, her hand resting lightly on the crown that had come to symbolize her journey. She reflected on the twists and turns that had brought her here, the initial rejection, the courage to return, and the transformation that followed. Her story was a testament not just to royalty or status, but to the power of standing firm in dignity and kindness. Somewhere nearby, Sophie passed by, bright-eyed and smiling, a living reminder of the difference one person's courage can make. As Emma looked toward the horizon, hope swelled, in the hearts she'd touched and in the promise of a future shaped by understanding. And now, dear viewer, what would you have done if faced with Emma's humiliation? Would you have quietly retreated, or stood tall to claim your rightful place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. See you in our next story.